There's so many extensions in Visual Studio, but where do you start? Join me and Mads as we share some of our favorites on this episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson, and today we're going to be talking about extensions, which is awesome because I work on extensibility. But prior to that, of course, we have the one and only Mads Kristensen joining us today, who's like the extensibility guru. Welcome, Mads.
Hello, thank you very much, Leslie. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a while.
Yeah, no, it has been a while. Shoot, nice to have you. I think we'll be seeing you later in a future episode anyway, too. So
I have a track record in coming here every now and again and showing off some extensions, and I guess that's why I'm here today too.
Yep. I don't know why this person just keeps popping up every so often. Like he's a pretty regular occurrence. Just won't go away. So
yeah. You can't get rid of me. No. I want to show it because I'm excited about extensions, and I love to dabble in the possibilities of Visual Studio and like how can we make Visual Studio more optimized for in my case my own workflow. Like how can I make Visual Studio as perfect as I can possibly make it for me? And in that vein, or in that process, like there are some benefits that I do that I like that other people also will benefit from, and so we can share our extensions with the world on the Visual Studio Marketplace, which we're going to look at, I think, at the end. But that's the whole idea, right? So we end up having like this big collection of thousands of extensions out there that we can use to like mix and match and customize Visual Studio so it's exactly right for us and our unique workflow, because everyone has like their own unique thing, right? I'm not just an extension developer. I also work a little bit on some websites that I'm running, and I have a few other things here and there. And so that's kind of a unique kind of setup for me. Like, and we all have like these differences. So being able to pull an extension for that scenario and an extension for this other scenario over here and like make it all work is super powerful.
It's like we have the phrase, there's an app for that, there's an extension for that. Like I know even like I use your presenter extension that you recently wrote just for my own personal demos and presentations that I have to give. Like I think that's just nice to have all those preset configurations. It's like, yeah. So ideal extensions vary for everybody, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I didn't actually bring that with me today, but that's a really good one. Presenter mode. Yeah, it just you press a button and it turns Visual Studio into this sort of everything. The font sizes and everything is the right size, and it resizes the screen to like 1080p, just right for you to demo, right?
So good. Yeah, because it's like I don't want it to be like 150% size all the time. Like in my regular work, I'd like it to be normal.
Yeah,
so
right.
I can do more stuff. Yeah, so. Yeah, it's good to have extensions for needs like that.
And so there's a lot of these scenarios. And so one thing that I do all the time is that I write a lot of extensions, and I do that. I have a show called Hacking Visual Studio that's on YouTube here as well.
Check it out. It's awesome.
Yeah. So if you're interested in writing extensions, go check out that show for sure. So I do write a lot of extensions, and I put all that up on GitHub as open source so other people can learn from it. And that means I have to write a lot of README files, and those are all Markdown. So years ago, I wrote a Markdown editor for Visual Studio, and I completely rewrote it for Visual Studio 2022. So let's take a look at my screen here. It's very similar to what it was in the original Markdown editor for Visual Studio 20. Did I write it for 2015 or 2017 originally? But this is one that's completely rewritten. It's exclusively for 2022. It's called Markdown Editor V2. It's the version 2. So this is like a much faster, much slimmer, much more responsive, and with everything fixed that anyone had ever like reported of issues or whatever has all been fixed in this version. It's just fantastic. So you have the automatic scrolling, so it syncs the preview window on the right hand side here with the left hand side, and this one also has dark theme support, so that's kind of nice. So the preview window itself follows the dark theme, and so you don't get that sort of glaring white if the rest of your Visual Studio is using the dark theme, right? So that's kind of nice. It just has so many cool features that I use all the time. And again, the reason I write this is because I have something that I want to do. I have a workflow and I want to optimize that. So here's one thing that I do all the time. I put screenshots into my Markdown files. So here you can see I have an image. Where is that image? Here, right here. Color preview. Here, screenshot PNG. That we see that over here in the preview window in the middle here. And one way to do that, so I just use in Windows 10 or 11, I can just take a screenshot. So let's just take a screenshot of the Solution Explorer here, just for something. So copy that, and I can now go in any place in my Markdown file and just hit Control V, like paste. And it's going to ask, hey, do you want to save this file? Yes. Put it in here. Let's call it Solution Explorer, and it's save, and boom, it's in.
Love it.
Right, I didn't have to go into my image editor and then save it or anything like that. It just boom, right here.
This is actually one of my favorite extensions too. Personally, whenever I have to write a doc or update a doc for the official documentation or something, I used to have to open up VS Code just because the Markdown experience in VS wasn't all that great. But having this extension in VS proper is really nice because now I can stay in one IDE and have a good time.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it, but same thing for me. And and some of the things. So for VS Code, for instance, David Anson, he wrote the Markdown linting extension that you can install, and so it checks for all sorts of things. And I took some of the things that I thought, hey, those were good linting things, and I moved them into this particular extension. So for instance, if you are linking to a file that doesn't exist, it calls it out. That makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's another one. So let's say that here I have a header. It has it's level 1. It has 1 hash or pound sign. And here, so what you want to do is you want to make sure that your header's always is the same as above or 1 below, right?
Yeah.
But not 2 below. And if you do that, you get like a squiggly here saying, hey, the heading level should only increment by 1 level at a time. So it catches certain things that I feel like those are universal things that we want to check for, and that's kind of nice. So you get a bunch of those things that were, extensions for VS Code. Like there's a little bit of good stuff from all over the place, all gathered into this particular extension, and I just really, really like this.
I love it too.
Yeah,
it takes so much time, and then you don't have to worry about the syntax. Things like copy pasting an image like you just showed. Sometimes I'll forget what that syntax looks like. You don't even have to worry about that here. It's nice.
And the keyboard shortcuts are here, so you can do Control B, bold something, or Control I for italics and stuff like that. So your keyboard shortcuts work just like you would expect from other editors, Word and so on. So that's really nice. So this just keeps keep your muscle memory intact, and So this is Markdown Editor V2.
Awesome. And all of these are available for Visual Studio 2022, right?
Yes, they're all free and they're all available for 2022. Yep, exactly.
I like the word free.
Yeah. All right. So let's move over to another one. This one is kind of an interesting thing. I've done a lot of web development. I used to be a web developer full time for 10 years. And one of the hardest thing was to how do you test your web APIs, HTTP requests. And so here's an extension. This is actually a port of one that existed for VS Code. But here I have a file called .http, and I can give it whatever name I want. So test.http, and here, let's just take a look. I can set some variables. That's kind of nice, right? Then I can create a post request. So I'm basically able to create an HTTP request directly in text. And I can use these variables. So I can create a post request to host, and host is defined up here. And set content type, I can have a comment, and I can have a whole post body as well. In this case, it's JSON, a JSON blob that I want to post to this API. And so on and so forth. I can do it with here's Google, here's Bing. If I click this arrow, it will send the web request and give me the result right here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So here, that's super nice, right?
Yeah, same window, no additional browser pull up.
None of that stuff. And I could go in. So here I have name hello, and it has like sort of some nice conveniences. So I can do something like name equals, and then here I get like nice brace completion. I get IntelliSense for my variables, that sort of stuff. So I can now do this. I can set what should the user agent be, and I get IntelliSense for this stuff. It's very nice.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so we can say, oh, this should be REST client, should be the user agent. Should that be quoted? Maybe that should be quoted.
Yeah, stuff like this is just great from a learning perspective, even. Like if you're learning about how APIs work and how API calls work, it really encourages experimentation because it's all contained into one specific spot instead of having to hop around and get frustrated when something's not working the way you expected it to.
Yeah, and you can check these files into your repo, right? So your whole team can like use them to hit your API endpoints for testing, to see what the response is going to be from your own web APIs, right? But there's another benefit to having this. These are just text files, right? A benefit of having those in your repo is that you can point to people and say, hey, here's how to use our API.
Oh yeah.
So if you're exposing your API and people are like, well, how am I gonna query your REST API? You can say, hey, here it is. This is how we use it internally too. So you can use it for documentation purposes instead of just for internal testing. And so that's really, really nice. And what's really cool is that this file here, this .http file, it works in Visual Studio with this extension, but it also works in Visual Studio Code. So they're interchangeable, those file formats. So that's kind of nice. So this is called the REST client. REST client. And that's also fairly new.
Awesome. Did you write that one too?
I did. And the reason I wrote this one was because I wanted to figure out if I could find a better way to write Visual Studio extensions that had a new that would introduce a new language, right? So if I wanted to create language support for some language that Visual Studio doesn't have support for, that I've done that in the past, and that was kind of hard, and I wanted to make that easier. So I wrote the Markdown Editor, V2, and I wrote this editor, the REST client language implementation, and a couple more. And I did that so that I could create a sort of a framework that takes away all the sort of ceremony and boilerplate and all the hard stuff and just boil it down to the super specific things that has to do with my language. And everything is kind of abstracted away. Everything else is kind of helpers and base classes and whatnot. And that allowed me to actually to write a whole bunch of extensions really, really quickly to introduce new languages. So here's one of those. Here's another one, TOML. So,
right, what's that?
So you know YAML, right?
Yeah.
So YAML is this. YAML is not JSON; it's its own thing. It's supposed to be more human readable. I don't know. I think there's a lot of pros and cons to YAML, but it seems to be relatively popular, regardless of what you might personally think of the format. But then there's TOML, and TOML is, I forget what it stands for, but it's like Tom's own markup language or something like that. So it's basically, how do we take something that is kind of hard syntactically, like maybe JSON or YAML is or can be, and make that sort of much flatter. So it's not as like it's not deeply nested or anything like that. It's kind of flat structure that's very easy to reason about and to understand.
Yeah, I mean, this looks very easy. There is no syntax really to be needed here. Yeah.
So this one is really cool. I was able to do this one fairly quickly and with this framework. So I have it here, and it's kind of smart. It does validation too. So it will call out if I have here I have a duplicate property. It's like, oh, you already defined this. Like that's not valid. Okay. So it helps me with that. Or if I misspelled some stuff or whatnot, it catches me. So that's really, really nice when it comes to stuff like this that is often used in configuration, right? This will fix those issues where you don't know why your app doesn't work, and it takes you 2 hours to figure out you had a typo in like a config file, right?
Everyone's favorite.
Everyone's favorite.
Yeah, it makes everyone feel great.
Yeah.
So is this what is this part, or what is the extension that corresponds with this? Is it called TOML too, or is it?
Yeah, it's just called TOML, or maybe TOML Editor. I think TOML Editor.
Nice.
TOML, TOML.
Shout out to Tom. It looks pretty good.
Yep. All right, let's see here. Oh. If I get that in. No, it didn't get. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Check this out. I'm hovering over this, and then with a keyboard shortcut, I can cycle through the different values, like true, false.
So, assuming you can do more than just like the Boolean values, can you toggle through other? Oh my gosh, what?
Yeah. What about a GUID?
Yeah, good.
Can you add one to a GUID? Can you make it one bigger? It turns out you can. Check this out. Look at the very last character of the whole GUID changes.
So cool.
Yeah. What about this one? Yeah, you can do that here with this. April 27. So it works with all these different formats here. But it also works with stuff like if you have the word like yes, it turns to no. You know, there are other Booleans than just yes, no, like on, off. It's the same thing, right? On, off. So this extension is called Shifter. And it allows you to Control Alt and then just the arrow keys up and down, takes any value and shifts it. So if it's shiftable, and so there's various different providers. There's the Boolean ones that takes true, false, or yes, no, on, off, and cycles through those, right? And then there's the one if you have a number, it will increase, decrease those. Then there's the GUID one that will increase and decrease a GUID. And then here's a CSS file. So let's see. This one, it actually darkens and lightens.
Oh my gosh, what? Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
What a lifesaver. I could totally see myself using this for CSS, which is like no one's favorite to tweak anyway. What a quick save instead of having to look up the hex every time.
It's super convenient for web developers here to be able to just, hey, I want to just give it a shade lighter. Right?
But having to look up the hex for it. Moving a slider bar online. Yeah. And so Shifter's cool. And that was one that I found on years ago. I think, was it on Eclipse's marketplace or something like that? It's one of the most popular extensions over there. And so it's a port of that, which is funny because I used to have an extension called Web Essentials that was introduced first for Visual Studio 2010. So I've had it for many years, like a decade, right? And it actually had this feature as well, where you could take a color value and then make it brighter or darker. So, awesome.
So I put that in here too.
Yeah, I love that. As somebody who is a stickler for color, I would be using that all the time.
Yeah. So in that case, you could see here why this is CSS, and see how these color glyphs show up.
Yeah, how do we get to color glyphs? That's even better.
That's how I could show you that the shifter makes it darker or lighter. Otherwise, it would just be numbers changing, and you'd be like, yeah, that probably works.
No, I have all the hexes memorized, actually, so I know exactly what shade it corresponds to. So, yeah.
Well, do you also have the 8-digit hex memorized? I mean, that's the tricky part.
Of course, yeah. I mean, gotta get all of them.
A lot of people don't know you can a hex color value in CSS can have 8 digits, and the last 2 is the alpha channel in that case. But check this out. Those color squares that are right there, also they used to be in Web Essentials. I just literally today, released this extension that just puts them into Visual Studio 2019 and 2022 for CSS. So you get color squares that show you what color you are working on. It's a small thing, but man, it's just so nice.
The little things matter. Yeah,
I know, right? So it's something that's coming into Visual Studio 2022 at some point in the future. It's already there if you go to the preview features and enable the new HTML and CSS editors that are kind of experimental right now. You will have this built in, but we don't know when that's going to come out of preview. That might take a while.
Gotcha. So for now, what is that extension?
So this one is just called Color Preview. Color Preview.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. And then you can click these. And if you click them, they open the color selector in Visual Studio. Yeah. So yeah, this color, I was the PM for the web team when we did this color selector. I remember presenting this to the team. We had spec reviews, and I was showing people how I wanted the color picker to be, and they were like, "I don't think this is a good idea." They all said.
What?
And then I'm like, "Well, it was." I showed them a different thing. It was, I think it was its own tool window or something. I was a brand new PM at the time, and then they said, "No, we don't think this." People didn't like it, and then it's okay. Well, I have this other thing that I think is kind of cool, but I think we don't have a paradigm for it. It would be like a new thing. We don't do stuff like this in Visual Studio, so I was kind of discarding it. And they're like, no, let's just see it. And then that was this. So this was like
nice.
It was a good thing we had that review. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this particular very rich color picker here.
That would be a sad day if we didn't have this.
Yeah. All right. So that's that. That was the color picker. I've also been playing around with themes. So the editor team, no, not the editor team in Visual Studio. They're called the IDE team. They're the ones that own Visual Studio and built Visual Studio the shell. So they don't make the languages, the C# and the C++ and all that sort of stuff. They just make sort of the platform that other teams in Visual Studio can put their features into Visual Studio, right? They're the platform team. And so they control stuff like themes. They're the ones that make that a thing. And so they just released something late last year for converting Visual Studio Code themes to VS. And so let's go in here, go to Tools, and scroll down to Theme. And see here, I have a bunch here called GitHub. So I have a theme pack that I made that's called GitHub Themes. And so I can take one. I like this GitHub Dark Dimmed.
I'm curious what this looks like. Yeah, I'm like, GitHub colors. what do I think of?
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of like that one. I like the Winter is Coming theme personally myself.
Oh, you like? Yeah, that's a good one. That's John Papa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like these. And the GitHub Lite, it's also kind of it's very pleasing to look at. I really like
that one. Actually is really pleasing with the blue, like the blue color tabs you got going on too. It's just
yeah. I actually really like these. So and here's the regular GitHub. So you'll find actually a lot of themes out there on the marketplace because people have been using this.
Everyone's so excited to use themes to be able to move VSCode themes, I think.
So let me show you something. Let me go to extension and extension manager. Let's see here. I have a VS Code theme converter. So I'm not going to show how to convert a theme, but if you install this extension, so I work with the platform team to figure out that they build a CLI tool, and the CLI tool for converting is like, okay, you can use that, but then now you have to manually figure out how to put that Visual Studio theme that the CLI tool produced based on the VS Code theme. You have to then figure out how to put that into an extension and then upload to the marketplace and so on. And if you don't know how to do that, that's very hard to do, right?
Right.
So I wrote this extension in collaboration with them to make that super easy. So if you wanna do a VS Code theme migration into VS, download this one, VS Code theme converter, and you can look at the description in the README file on the marketplace or on GitHub or wherever you download this from. You can click this more information right here. That'll take you to it. You can see how to do it, and it's super easy.
Love it.
So yeah, so I'm a big fan.
I was going to say it's kind of like Inception. It's like, here's this extension to help you with this other extension to get your awesome theme.
Yes, totally. It's very meta.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. So you get all these nice themes, and I'm just a fan. But back to the blue theme here because that's kind of nice for presenting purposes. You know what else is nice for presenting?
What? Not presenter mode?
Presenter mode would be nice, but something called font sizer.
Oh yeah, that's
so. I can do Control plus, Control minus, create. Doesn't change the zoom factor. Look here, zoom factor is 140. It says down here. So now I hit Control minus. It's still 140. It decreased the font size. So if I go to Tools option Fonts, that was lowered. Okay. Check this out. No, so why? No, hang on. why this is important is there are certain things that doesn't zoom well. You want to make sure all your like peak definition and the tool tips and all sort of things in the editor has the right zoom size.
Right.
And so this extension called Font Sizer takes all those different things and size them equally, higher or lower. So
really including like IntelliCode and stuff?
All that stuff. So you need a numpad for the keyboard shortcut to work. You need a numpad, right? So because there's a difference between the plus that you see and minus that are out here versus the ones that are kind of on your normal keyboard, like on the equals sign or whatever up here. So that's how that works. But check this out. So one thing is the editor, but if you're presenting and people are sitting far away, you want to be able to make the menus in Visual Studio larger as well. So Control Shift plus minus. Check out all the menus here up top.
Oh,
right?
Thank goodness. That is wonderful. Yep.
You can go up and down, and you can do these independently. So you can either just do the editor or you can just do the sort of the Chrome of Visual Studio, and that's going to make sure that everyone can see what you're doing, whether you're presenting at a conference or if you're in a meeting room or you're on Teams, and you know, things are getting small.
I'm going to tell all my guests to download this, download this particular one, because we always have the issue of like, well, that's cool, but we can't actually see any of the words that aren't in the editor. Mm-hmm. The font's too small. So
yeah, it's a real thing, and I've noticed that a lot of people, especially engineers that sit there, behind their 36-inch monitors with the most ridiculous resolution, right? It's like 8K resolution. What happens is that when they share their screen on like a Teams meeting and it shows up on my little laptop screen here, I can hardly see anything. Everything is so small. Mm-hmm. And so if they had a way to say, oh, let me just boost up for a Teams presentation, then that would be tremendously helpful for me in this case.
Totally.
Anyone that doesn't have a huge screen like that they do, right? So
yeah.
Yep. Man, we're getting through a lot here. I got more.
Yeah. You got a whole arsenal worth.
Yep.
Oh, do have a quick question about the shifter extension from earlier. Yep. So it works for CSS. Does it work for XAML?
Sure does. It works. It's completely independent of language. It works in any language.
Oh, sweet.
It's purposely written such that it kind of just looks at regexes, sort of. It doesn't care about what the language is, what the semantics of the language is. It only cares about string, like substring matches that it can find. So
okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, so just let's go through. I just have some quick ones. Let's do some quick ones.
Lightning round.
Yeah, lightning round. KnownMonikers Explorer. A lot of people don't know this, but Visual Studio ships with what's called an image library, which contains all the images that Visual Studio itself has, all the little icons and so on. That's about 4,000 images. And this image library is free to use. You can even distribute those icons and those images in your own applications, license free and all that sort of stuff. And so what the KnownMonikers Explorer does is that it shows you all the icons that are there. So you can say, if you can search for something called, like, let's just search for status. That gives you a bunch of stuff. So you can see all these. Let's grab this one. So I just double click and you see a large representation of it. All icons in Visual Studio are vector, like they're basically SAML. Mm-hmm. So you can export them completely high res in any size you want. So you can say, okay, give me 120, they're all square. So you just, what's the size? Width is the same as the height then, right? So 128 pixels, and you're going to produce that, and you click export, and it's going to put that, on your disk somewhere. So you can get access to all those 4,000 images and search through them right here with this extension. Super handy.
Very nifty.
Here's one, also a very quick one. Remember the start page that we used to have in Visual Studio 2017 and earlier? We have the developer news. Well, now you can get developer news and you can see everything that's going on. And you can even customize it to see, do you just want Visual Studio? Do you want .NET, ASP.NET? Do you want some NuGet and PowerShell stuff in there? Save that, and that will then update the feed. And now this is your subscription. And you can click something and you have it open in the browser that's in Visual Studio, like right here. Or if you control click, it will open in your default browser. You can also see what the default behavior should be right here. So if you go to settings. So super handy way of making sure that you don't miss anything, whether it's blog posts or events that are being posted, which we see a lot of people actually do miss, like events that we do announce, but people just forget to see the blog post, or they don't know where to find this information. So go check that out. That's available for both 2019 and 2022.
Awesome.
And so is KnownMonikers Explorer. All the image library that I showed you before is available 2017, 2019, and 2022.
Great. So these kind of span the gamut.
Yes. I think, are we out of time? I think we ran through a whole bunch.
Yeah, that was pretty good. I wasn't counting, but I'm pretty sure we hit at least 10, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so exciting. So where can people go to get started with extensions or learn more about how to write their own awesome extensions or any of that?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, if you haven't really looked at what's available for free, then go in Visual Studio to the top level menu. There's something called extensions. Click that, go to the extension manager, and look what's there. It's sorted by what's the most popular. So that's a good place to start. You can also expand it to look at different categories. So that is just a nice way to kind of go and discover things. You can also go to the website marketplace.visualstudio.com that has all these extensions. So that's number one place to begin. If you want to write your own extensions, you've always wondered how to do it. The good news is that it's gotten a lot easier in the recent years. So whether you've tried it in the past and given up because it was too complicated, trust me, it's a lot easier than it used to be. And so it's not as dangerous, or it's not as black magic, obscure stuff that you might think. And a really good place to get started is to go to the VSIX Cookbook.com. So that's VSIX V6. That's also the file extension of a Visual Studio extension. So VSIX Cookbook.com is a really good place to start.
Yep, totally agree. And of course, Mads has his awesome show that he hosts called Hacking Visual Studio. I think you premiere every Friday. Is that it?
Every Friday, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, tune in on Fridays or check out his archive. Lots of really helpful stuff. He knows what he's doing. I'll watch some of your vids sometimes, honestly, just for my own how to write extension purposes. So yeah, great. Very informative. And other than that, thanks for coming. It's always awesome having you on the show and talking about extensions, which
anytime. I take every opportunity I can get to talk about extensions. So I'm happy that you invited me on.
Sweet. Glad you could be here. So until next time, y'all, happy coding.